Hey guys, Peter here to do an album review. Today I'm here to tell you about the latest from Persefone, Metanoia, out February 4th on Napalm Records. The album has 10 tracks, 58 minutes in length, and this is the band's 6th full-length studio album. They are a progressive melodic death metal band from Andorra. Now, this album comes across as a solid experience. What I mean by that is that it's a record that feels like one song divided into 10 different acts. The way they achieve that is by creating the perfect fluidity. This record doesn't end at the end of each and every single song. Each track rather allows you to learn something from it and take that experience forward and allow you to build on the overall design of the record and allow the album to grow and you grow with it. A record that never interrupts the experience until you actually reach the last song. So that sense of continuity, that sense of fluidity has an incredible positive impact in the overall playability and the overall understanding that you walk away from this record with. Having said that, you can still understand the songs on the individual basis. It's not like they only work in the context of the record. You can still get a lot out of them as individual tracks. But if you want to comprehend the album as a whole, you definitely have to take the experience of navigating through it in order, in sequence, all as one. Now, as far as sound is concerned, the sound on this album is phenomenal, incredible. It's rich, it's textured, it's layered. There's a lot to be given to the listener throughout the entire experience of listening to this album. It doesn't stay uniform from song to song. There are some elements that navigate or migrate from track to track, but each song has a little bit of an individuality to it that allows the album to be rich at every single turn. It's also an album that is not defined by a single genre. Prog is the spinal cord, that's where it all starts, but it all branches out from that point forward. You have symphonic elements, you have rock elements, classic, melodic death metal. There's a lot of things coming to the table in order to make the sound as rich as possible on this record. It's also an album that feels very thin at times, or it's an album that spreads out really largely, and the bigger that it gets, the harder it is for you to define where the shapes end. Because of that, it feels like it's always getting away from you. But there's elements within the record that bring it closer, that bring the sound experience a little bit closer. One of them is the drums. I really like what the drums are doing on this record from that perspective, because they help define a little bit better the parameters of the album, the parameters of each and every single song, without dominating the experience, without dominating the tracks. They really help ground the album and give you a sense of depth within the tracks. So while the sound is navigating, while the sound is moving, morphing, growing, and sometimes moving away from the listener, the drums always have the effect of bringing it a little bit back, or at least bringing it within reach, so you as the listener feel like everything is within your arm's length. Very important element for a record that has this sort of approach, that has this sort of atmosphere, that has this sort of experience. The guitars are a little bit more diverse in terms of what they give, what they offer, and how they move the sound around. They really dictate a lot of what's happening within this record. They offer texture, they offer quality. They're a little bit of the conductor in terms of the soundscape and the impact that that soundscape has in the atmosphere. I don't feel like they're the drivers of the experience, but they're part of what drives the overall experience. This is a record that doesn't depend on drums, vocals, guitars, on one specific element of its sound in order to create what the album is all about. This is a record that lives off of everything coming together at the right time, with the right amounts, in the right formula, in order for the sound itself to drive the experience, but not one of the elements within it. And one of the elements that plays a very important role in the sound is the vocals. I honestly felt like the vocals are more of an instrument than anything else on this record. From the clean vocals to the harsh vocals, they play a role of creating definitions, of helping shape how these songs come across. But there was no point on this record that I felt that the vocals were anything more than just another instrument, in order to create a layer, in order to create depth, in order to make the songs a little bit richer, a little bit easier to digest, a little bit easier to understand. I personally gravitated more towards the clean vocals on this record. I think with the soundscape that you have, with the atmosphere that they created, the clean vocals fit a lot better. They become more diluted in the overall design of the album, in the overall experience of the album. The harsh vocals are a little bit more rugged, and because they're a little bit more rugged, it's hard to blend them in with everything else that is happening. Even when the sound gets a little bit heavier on the record, the harsh vocals still feel a little bit outside of the box, still feel a little bit outside of the shapes that they created for this album. The clean vocals have a much better way to ease themselves in, integrate themselves into everything that is happening. But both elements are important. You need the dynamic between those two, because this is an album that lives off of dynamics. It lives off of ebbs and flows, changes, musical changes, vocal changes. And when you look at the vocals as another instrument, as another piece of the puzzle, you have to have that same dynamic approach in them. Overall, this album can only be defined by saying that if Pink Floyd was a band from Andorra, a prog melodic death metal band from Andorra, and they were releasing an album today, this is what the album would sound like. That's the best way for me to describe the overall experience of listening to this record. As far as favorite songs are concerned, I want to start off with Katabasis. This is the second track on the record, and it's Heaven and Hell. It has that duality. You feel like there's these two parallel universes, one that has heaviness, that has aggression, and one that has peace, melancholy, and a little bit of darkness. These two are moving side by side, but eventually they cross paths and they become one, allowing the song to have this combination of sound, combination of atmosphere. The lines become blurred and everything just becomes a lot bigger, a lot larger. And that is what becomes the definition of the song itself. I love the construction, I love the execution. Next you have Leap of Faith. It starts off with a fire pit like burning, and it sounds like it's burning in this wet cave, somewhere in a cave. Like it just has that sort of feel, that sound. That's the atmosphere that opens up the track. And then the keys come in. Now the keys play a very important role throughout the entire song. First of all, I like the start because it starts to set the mood, and it sets a very somber, dark mood. And then it starts to build upon that. Now this is a song that has exponential growth as you move along. It's dynamic, but it's dynamic in an upwards movement, not necessarily in a linear movement or in a more bouncy style movement in terms of having speed bumps along the way. It's not the case. This song grows and morphs. It starts to add more volume, adding more elements, become bigger and bigger as you start to walk your way out of this cave, perhaps. That's kind of the feeling that it builds. It has a great sense of continuity and a great sense of sequence as you progress, because you can understand exactly where your starting point was, and you can understand the path that's ahead of you and what steps you need to take in order to get to that destination. That track brings everything to the table, and it makes everything be absolutely crystal clear to you. And then you have Aware of Being Watched, and that is the exiting of that tunnel, exiting of that cave. And this song brings in a lot of light. It brings in a lot of brightness. It just feels a little bit more of a song that allows itself to grow, not necessarily exponentially. It's more dynamic. It has ebbs and flows, but it grows in terms of the footprint that it has. It allows itself to expand. It's a track that just feels like it has movement to it. It expands, it contracts, but it always feels like it expands more than what's contracting. The dynamic that the clean vocals bring to this song is really important because it adds a different feel to the way the song comes about. It adds even more brightness, it adds even more light to the way the whole track is put together, and it just enhances the experience that already exists musically. This is a perfect track to see how the vocals work as an added instrument. They're not on top of the sound, they're not driving the sound, they're not narrating what's happening within the sound, they are part of the sound itself. This song really describes the entire album in a nutshell. This is it. Persefone with Metanoia, out February 4th on Napalm Records. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.